Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I might have been a little bit overly ambitious, a little too optimistic, but at the beginning of this year, I set a goal for myself to read 100 books. And you're like,
That's crazy. That's unbelievable.
but I did pass that goal last year, so I thought totally attainable. And you're probably wondering, Ashley, how was that goal going? Like, how strong of a start did you get? Not so strong of a start. Let's say that it's about 2 weeks into January right now, mid-January. And usually, for context, I can read about a book a week, and I've read a whopping 0. So I was thinking now might be a good time to maybe plan out my reading month and figure out what I want to read in January. And now I'm calling it planning my reading month, but you could also call it a TBR. Kind of have
A love-hate relationship.
with TBRs.
Hey, these are really helpful for when I'm in a reading slump and I don't know what I want to read next, and for me to like check off along the way, motivate me.
On the other end of the spectrum, when I'm a mood reader, which I often am, and I don't want to pick anything off the list, it can be kind of restricting. So for the case that we're in now, this might be necessary, and I'm doing it because I think it will motivate me to finish books instead of just like starting them and then leaving them on my nightstand and then never touching them ever again. Moving on to my Notion now, where I track most of my reading, my currently reading, and then the books I have read. I also have a longer TBR list tracked in Goodreads and Storygraph, but we're just going to keep to Notion now because I want to keep my monthly TBR here. So scrolling down, these are the 4 books that I'm currently reading. These are the ones that are sitting on my nightstand that I've gone a good way through, but I haven't finished any of them. Starting off with Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. I'm reading this as a buddy read with my friend Nora. She hasn't read much historical fiction, so I kind of want to introduce her to it. And I also haven't read The Book Thief, so I thought this would be a good beginner book for us. But this is about a girl who I believe grows up not really knowing how to read, so she moves into a foster family and learns how to read, becomes obsessed with books, and kind of starts stealing them. All of this with the backdrop of World War II and Hitler coming to power. And that's all I'm really going to say. I think one interesting thing to note, though, is that Death is the narrator of this book, which makes it very unique and definitely lends an interesting perspective. Next up, we have Jade Legacy, which is the 3rd book in the Greenbone saga, the final book. Greenbone Saga has quickly become one of my favorite series. I wish I had gotten to it sooner. I actually recommended it to a friend who binged the whole thing in like 3 days and was like, hey, I love the series. Oh my gosh. Like, thank you so much for recommending it to me. And I was like, yeah, you're welcome. It seemed really up your lane. I've actually never read it. So she's been waiting, I think, about a year now for me to get on it. And I flew through the first 2 books, but this 3rd book is just really heart-wrenching. And I don't want it to end, so I'm kind of like very slowly going through it. Next up, I have Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton. This one is a new adult fantasy romance, and it's very similar, I would say, to the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black, in that it's an urban fantasy. There's a human world, and then kind of in parallel, there is a fairy world. It's got a much darker tone, much darker themes, but the whole like enemies to lovers situation, very much there. And added on, you have a marriage of convenience in this. So if any of that interests you, I know those tropes are very popular, I would recommend this. And then finally, I'm reading The Secret History with my friend Liz. This is another buddy read, and how do I even explain what's going on with Secret History? This is kind of like classic dark academia. We wanted to read this before we read Babel by R. Kwong because I think Babel is kind of like a juxtaposition or like a commentary on The Secret History. I might be wrong about that, so don't quote me. But this is about a group of kind of pretentious university students, and one of them ends up dead. And we all kind of have an inkling that the rest of his friends kind of had something to do with it. So that's what that's about. I've only read maybe like 50-ish pages of this, so I don't know too well what the story is about, because I like to go into most of my books having absolutely no clue what it's about and kind of finding out along the way. So those are the 4 books that I'm currently reading. I just added them into the January TBR because I think I'm gonna finish them this month. Like, I am 90% sure that I'll finish them this month. And so we kind of really just need to look for 4 more, because I think 8 is usually around the range that I hit on average month. If I'm doing really well, then I would bump it up, but obviously we're not doing really well right now. So regarding the 4 other books that I want to read, I got a bunch of books gifted to me for the holidays, so I do want to get some of my physical TBR done, but I also want to kind of have a winter theme. So I think maybe like 2 books we're going to do off my physical TBR, and then 2 books of a winter theme. And that should wrap it up, I think, for the January planning of what to read. Okay, so now here is my bookshelf. Please do not comment on how empty it is. It is a work in progress, and I'm just saving the space for future books that I will buy and love and cherish. So that's that. And now we're going to be picking out all of the books from my physical TBR that I want to add to the January TBR. So let's do that. Okay, so I've got a couple of options here. I've picked out 3 books. We only really need 2, so we're gonna narrow it down. A lot of them have to do with like sci-fi or fantasy, because that is my go-to genre. Again, not many wintry books, which is why I was saying I kind of wanted to pick out 2 different winter books that I could probably borrow from my library to still feed that wintry vibe, because it's still January and I have yet to see really any great snow. So first off, we have Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I'm pretty sure I want to pick this one up. I think this is definitely going to be one of the options. I adore V.E. Schwab's writing. One of my favorite series is the Darker Shade of Magic series, and that is phenomenal. I will say I feel like some of her books are hit or miss. The Incredible Life of Addie LaRue, for example, for me was, good, but I just didn't feel like the innate connection I felt with the Darker Shade of Magic series. And then I didn't read Gallant because I think it was middle grade and it would be a little too young for me and I wasn't the target audience. But Vicious is one of her other duologies that I've heard is really good and follows these 2, I think, college friends who end up kind of having a breakup. They have some conflict and they both become villains and try to one-up each other in villainy. I might be getting that totally wrong. Let me just quickly read the back. So, Victor and Eli started out as college roommates, brilliant, arrogant, lonely boys who recognize the same sharpness and ambition in each other. In their senior year, a shared research interest in adrenaline, near-death experiences, and seemingly supernatural events reveals an intriguing possibility that under the right conditions, someone could develop extraordinary abilities. But when their thesis moves from the academic to the experimental, things go horribly wrong. So, okay, that sounds interesting. I might have been making up the part where they have a falling out, but I feel like I heard that somewhere, so it must be semi-true. But yeah, I've heard people say great things about this. I love a good villain story anyway, so excited to pick up this one. Now, the 2 that I'm kind of going back and forth on, I think I've maybe come to a decision, are Brandon Sanderson's Skyward or Marissa Meyer's Renegades. I haven't read any Sanderson. This is his YA sci-fi series, and have heard great things about it as well. I don't really know what it's about, but love sci-fi, and Brandon Sanderson is said to be a great writer of fantasy, and I think he probably does a very good job of writing sci-fi as well. But that's all I really know. And then Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I really loved her Lunar Chronicles series. That's a YA sci-fi series as well. This is a YA story about superheroes. I love superheroes, so hopefully that this is up my lane, because I got gifted the entire trilogy, which is also kind of why I'm gravitating towards picking this to read, because I know if I really fall in love with it, that the rest of the series are on hand and I can kind of just binge it. Whereas with Brandon Sanderson's Skyward, I really like the UK covers, which means I have to order them off Book Depository, so it takes a little bit longer. So if I fall in love with this, there might be a longer wait time between books and I wouldn't be able to binge it. So I think for that reason, I'm going to pick up Renegades this month and start on this series. And
hopefully I fall in love with it and it's everything I want.
And it gives kind of like
Marvel movies.
Or like a Marvel vibe.
I would even be okay with a DC vibe.
So we'll see. I am excited for this. Love Marissa Meyer. I feel like a lot of her books are kind of just like comfort reads, and that the characters are super lovable and they always have some happy ending. So kind of need that in my life right now. Anyways, with that decision made, I guess, I'm going to be picking up Renegades and Vicious as our two physical books to add to the January TBR. Back on my desk now, I'm going to add the two books that we just selected onto my Notion TBR. So let's do that. First, we had Vicious by V.E. Schwab, and then we had Renegades by Marissa Meyer. Now, we gotta figure out what exactly are some wintry reads that we can add to the TBR. And the issue is there's no filter to be like, hey, just choose books that have kind of wintry vibes to them or a setting. So we're gonna have to do this a little old school and go into my full list of TBR books in Goodreads. And I think kind of just go through and based off of what I know about the books or like the cover, choose some that I think provide that wintry atmosphere. So let's see. Starting off, I'm just gonna scroll, and then when I see something, I'll stop and be like, maybe this is an option. Okay. I believe Crown's Game has a wintry Moscow or Russian-inspired setting. Okay. First sentence we see, Vika can summon the snow. Okay, great. They are enchanters, the only two in Russia, and with the Ottoman Empire and the Kazakhs threatening, the Tsar needs a powerful enchanter by his side. Okay. So I think this is a good option. Let's keep looking, and then we'll kind of weigh all our pros and cons and then pick a couple. If I scroll by a book, guys, and you guys are like, yeah, that has such a wintry setting, like, you should have had that as an option. Guys, like I said, I don't really know what the books about my TBR are about. I, like, add them months ago, and then I just forget. So, like I said, we're going off of titles, covers, whatever I do remember. Okay, I don't think there's anything on this page. I'm trying to like gradually slim down my TBR, and I haven't been adding that many new books to it, which is also why like there are a lot of books that I remember this stuff about because there isn't anything that I added recently, if that makes any sense. So keep that in mind. I feel like Naomi Novak's Uprooted or Spinning Silver has something to do with winter. Spinning Silver. Okay, Spinning Silver has... The cover looks fairly wintry. Could pick up some historical fiction. Sometimes I feel like historical fiction has a kind of wintry vibe. I don't really know why. I just feel like when it's winter time, it's time to look back at our history and all the events we've overcome. Although we cannot see a gentleman in Moscow, I feel like that has a potential to have a wintry, cold vibe. Yeah, and that's it. Okay. We have a couple options here. I think the Crown's Game very explicitly talks about snow, and I'm sure like there are going to be scenes about her magic and her creating this frosty winter wonderland during this competition, it seems, to become the Tsar's enchanter. So I have high hopes for that. Okay, Uprooted. Maybe there isn't anything. It might be Spinning Silver that has the more wintry vibe to it. This seems to be a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, which is, love it. I love any type of fairy tale retelling. It just feels homey. It feels comfy because you kind of know the story, but each author puts their own unique spin on the retelling. So I'm kind of gravitating more towards Spinning Silver over Uprooted. A Gentleman in Moscow, another kind of like historical fiction read. A Gentleman in Moscow immerses us in another elegantly drawn era with the story of Count Alexander Rostov. He's deemed an unrepentant aristocrat by a Bolshevik tribunal. Oh, okay. He's in a house arrest in a grand hotel for a very long time. He lives in an attic room while some of the most tumultuous decades in Russian history are unfolding outside the hotel's doors. Okay. That's interesting. So I'm reading quite a number of like fantasy and sci-fi novels. Granted, I am reading The Book Thief as well, but I feel like this could be interesting to pick up just to add a little bit of variety in my reading this month. I am, let me think. We have 4 options. We need to narrow it down to 2 because I'm not reading all these 4. We already have established that this month is going to be kind of tough for me reading wise, so let's not overshoot. Okay, I think I've solidified my picks, and I am gravitating towards Spinning Silver and A Gentleman in Moscow, which, you know, might not be super wintry, super cold, because, you know, Moscow, I think, is very much in that area of Russia where they still get kind of like 4 seasons. However, the story seems really interesting, and the cover itself gives a kind of like dreary, cold feel. So I think those 2 are going to be the ones that we add to our January TBR. So going back now to our Notion, I'm going to put in Spinning Silver and then A Gentleman in Moscow. So to recap now everything that we have discussed and the 8 books that I will be reading this month. We got, let me pull them up. The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak as a buddy read. And then we also have The Secret History as another buddy read with a friend. And then Jade Legacy as the last book in the Green Moon Saga. So I'm gonna make this a priority. I really have to finish it this month, I think. We also have Fortuna Sworn, which I'm reading on my iPad here. And that I'm actually I've made pretty good progress on too. I think last time I checked I was like 70% on it. So I think I could finish that definitely this month. And then we also have Renegades and Vicious as 2 other physical books that I will be reading this month. The other 2, Spinning Silver and A Gentleman in Moscow, I'm going to borrow from my library. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me and helping plan out my January reading month. And let me know in the comments down below what your reading goal for this year is and your progress so far. Please, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!